Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the yet-to-be-named basketball podcast that is so graciously held by Evan on his wonderful channel that you all know and love. We've been talking about some basketball teams. We're previewing 7 of them before this season. And today, the one you're listening to, get down to the bayou because we're headed to New Orleans. Okay, so the Pelicans, I think, the most confusing team in the NBA. Absolutely laden with talent. A lot of good things going on there. Zion is there. Ingram, even if I don't know if he's a max level guy, he's there. Lonzo Ball, historically great feel player in transition. Steven Adams is good. Eric Bledsoe is good. JJ Redick is good. However, none of these guys make sense together, not for a second. So what do we have? What is your initial sense of this team coming out of New Orleans, these Pelicans, Evan?
So I'll say this. I hope this doesn't give anything away. It does give some stuff away. But we picked 7 teams. Of these 7 teams, this is the only team we're talking about that underwent a coaching change. So in addition to the roster being confusing, there is a level of mystery to how the coach will make the pieces fit. I really don't know. New Orleans could be very, very good or very, very bad. I have to shrug my shoulders.
Okay, so let's, at the very start, we'll get into this in every podcast, but with this team, the ceiling and the floor. This team might be the most interesting because what is the ceiling? What is the floor? As you said, could be very, very good, could be very, very bad. We've seen every player on this team achieve some level of success on an okay team. When Ingram was going, the Pelicans were okay. Zion had really good numbers as far as being a positive player towards winning, even if his defense was unreliable. Steven Adams is 1 game away from the finals as he's trying to, bludgeon the Warriors to death with Serge Ibaka in 2016. And Bledsoe was a couple games away from the finals as well, and maybe was a huge part of the Bucks not making it. JJ Redick kicks ass. Lonzo Ball hasn't played on a very good team yet, and he, there's limitations to his game, but this team in transition, it feels like, could be very special. Lonzo plus Ingram plus Zion plus Bledsoe. Steven Adams, he'll get the rebound or he'll get a box out so they can get out early. In the half court, what does that offense, you're the coach, man, what does that offense look like to you if you're trying to construct a half court offense with those players?
So Stan Van Gundy, when he first got hired, I sort of imagined forgetting for a second that he was the Pistons coach. I thought back to what I thought was his most recent and his most successful team. So Zion and Brandon Ingram, I imagined in a sort of like new age Dwight Howard / Rashard Lewis super front court. But, I start to think about it more and more, and it's Zion at center it's fun to think about, but is it real? Is that the type of pairing that could really succeed? And if it is, why pay Steven Adams that much money? Is there enough shooting to space around them properly? There are so many, like I said, so many question marks. But to hit on what we were talking about, ceiling, floor, ceiling they're a playoff team. They could be a fun playoff team. And with Stan, I'll talk about this a little bit later, they could be very competitive in their games, if not in the series. The floor is the bottom. The floor is not making the playoffs. The floor is hanging out with Oklahoma City, with whom they co-own every pick of the future, apparently. So.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, right? Because as you say, this funky retrofitted idea of like Rashard Lewis and Dwight Howard. Is that feasible? Is Zion in a Dwight position? No. And they extended Steven Adams. It wasn't like this asset collection to be moved later. They extended him at, I think, $17 million a year, which is maybe a little bit above market. So you're wondering, like, okay, what the hell are they doing with this team? Is Bledsoe gone? Is Lonzo gone? I mean, you want to keep Lonzo and see what he becomes, and he's on a friendly contract as well. Ingram, I think you kind of know what you have, especially if he's, I'll throw the graphic up there, an immensely improved three-point shooter. I mean, the jump he took from his last year with the Lakers to his first year with the Pelicans, very good, and obviously fueled a lot of the speculation around whether he was a max player, and then it became tangible. He signed a max contract. That was huge for him. But the, machinations of this team and what it might look like, I have no idea what it might be. And as you said, they could be good because there are concrete things that they do well. They're going to defend well at quite a few positions. They're going to score well at a couple positions. They're going to score at least at a very high clip, very high percentile in transition. So all those things are going for them. And the unknown is the half-court offense. As we've seen, the Raptors of last year, for example, teams can skirt half-court responsibilities quite well if they have a point guard who's willing to push, if they have players who want to get on transition. Zion, Lonzo, Bledsoe, as I said, they'll be able to skirt some half-court opportunities. Will their defense be in trouble because of that? I don't know. What do you feel is concrete about this team?
Defense, Stan Van Gundy, just about everywhere you could have heard him. Podcasts, on the call, talks about, so the most efficient shot in the game is free throws, according to him. The second is layups or shots in the paint in the restricted area. So the greater you can stop the ball from getting into the paint, the greater you can protect yourself against teams getting layups and fouls. So you think about the Pistons the last time they made the playoffs. I think they haven't made it since Stan Van Gundy left. KCP, Andre Drummond, Tobias Harris, Reggie Jackson, Marcus Morris, Stanley Johnson, Steve Blake, Aaron Baines. Not exactly guys who you think would hold a championship team to, let's see. LeBron averaged 3.75 free throws a game against those Pistons in that series. Except for game 2 where J.R. Smith went 7 of 11 from 3, the Pistons lost by an average of 5.5 points a game in a sweep. They're a team that Stan doesn't really care about very much else outside of getting every detail right. So I know that they're going to get the details exactly correct. I know they're going to wall up. You can play that famous clip if you want, but they're going to wall up. They're going to stop you from getting to where you want to go. And Stan, when he has called Milwaukee games, has talked about how Milwaukee was the top defense in the league back-to-back years, and they gave up maybe the most threes. So I think they'll have their calling card on defense. They have all the tools. He will maximize their effort, and they won't beat themselves in these situations. My question is kind of, how are they going to get out and run? Because they were a running team again under Gentry, but will they? And I agree with you that their best asset is their ability to get out and run, but how often will they be able to do that? And how often will they choose to attack the offensive glass? That's another thing that Stan Van Gundy has talked a lot about. If the way teams defend stretch fours nowadays, or I guess nowadays, I have this quote from 2015 because I'm a giant nerd and I collect Stan Van Gundy quotes. He talked about how if you can't attack the mismatch, your stretch four, if he's not a great post-up player, he has to be willing to attack the offensive glass. So how much of that is going to – there are so many little things here and there that I don't have the answer to, because is anybody on this team besides maybe Josh Hart a great offensive rebounder? I'm not sure. How much will they emphasize tracking back in transition versus getting out in transition? So lots of question marks.
I think Lonzo can be a pretty good offensive rebounder, but not in the way that Josh Hart is. Like, Lonzo is a sneaky opportunity offensive rebounder, and while Hart has some of that, Hart is also like can go climb the ladder and surprise defenses that weren't expecting him to do so. Like, he can go contest around the bucket from time to time. Zion, I'm sure he'll throw his weight around and like he'll bully some guys under the bucket, and there'll be kind of those hanging rebounds that he's going to get to because he has a really quick second jump as well. Steven Adams, he's going to get some putbacks. He's going to get to that kind of stuff. But that is a good question. How often are they deployed? Is the team's ethos that they want their guys hunting those types of opportunities down instead of getting back on defense? What is the duality there? What do they choose to do, and how often? That remains to be seen. An interesting question. So let's talk about the quote-unquote stars. Zion is being marketed as the star of the NBA at this point. Like, he gets national TV games, even though the Pelicans, nobody knows what they're going to look like, as I'm saying for the third time. He gets national TV games. He had a bunch last year. He had the opening game of the season against the Raptors that he didn't play, but they want Zion. They want him bad, and deservedly so. His phenotype, his body type has just not really been seen in the NBA. It is remarkable. And his ability to turn defenders into turnstiles that like sweep sideways. There's a clip I know of him doing it to Kuzma just because of the force he brings to the floor. It's incredible. On the other side, freshly maxed Brandon Ingram, a guy who I am lower on than most people, I think. I think that the shooting is not as good as the statistics indicated last year. I think he saw a heavy amount of fluctuation from the start of the year where he was like 51% from the mid-range. That came quite a bit down towards the end of the year. Is he truly a three-level scorer? He's going to have to shoot not just catch-and-shoot jumpers from beyond the line at a good pace, but he's also going to have to hit his pull-up threes, of which he only hits 28%. And the year before, basically had no volume. It was 60%, but on 0.1 attempts a game. Just no volume as a pull-up three guy. He's young. He can develop. He has some fundamentals of a good jumper there, although it's kind of hitchy. It remains to be seen. And he's long, so his defense, anytime he gets a little bit smarter on defense, he gets better because of his length. And while there is like not a lot of meat on his bones, I think his length will help him a lot. What do you think Ingram will be next year? And if you want to comment on Zion, who is, undeniable in a lot of ways, but is also good to his own right. What do you think of those two guys?
So for Ingram, I imagine him taking – so I said Rashard Lewis earlier. He's going to be more like – I can't believe – a Hito Turkoglu / Rashard Lewis of, really a three skill set, traditionally speaking, because the league was very different back then, at the four position. So my question is, his usage rate, about 1/3 of the team's usage rate, about 20.
I think it's 28.
Yes. Okay. So 20%. But like a guy like Drew Holiday had about 27% on his usage. So that's out the window, right? Where's it gonna go in terms of Drew's numbers? Where's it gonna go? Is it gonna be spread out over everybody? Is Ingram going to take an even greater leap in terms of his usage? I'm not sure. I think that Ingram is best deployed as a four, but like I said, there's a logjam. There's not necessarily a logjam, but there might be a spacing issue if he's not the four, or if Melly's not the four. because now you're talking about Zion plus Steven Adams, or one of those two plus Jackson Hayes. And Jackson Hayes, Brandon Ingram, that's a really lean front court. And your guards can be as explosive as you want them to be, even though, Bledsoe, Ball, they're athletic guys. Hart, very athletic too. But that's not a lineup I see Stan throwing out very often. So what is the 96-minute allocation going to look like at the front court? Because Ingram's going to play 32, 35. Zion, hopefully, if he can play 75% of his games, will be playing in that 32, 35 range. So what does Steven Adams' numbers look like? So Lonzo, not a bad off-ball guy, actually shot decent, 39% on above the break threes. What's it going to be like for him? Because if you can, Stan talks about walling up. If you can wall up against Brandon Ingram and turn him into a shooter, he's an okay to good mid-range shooter. But as his usage creeps up, those pull-up threes are going to creep up also, I imagine. And his shooting numbers, unless he takes a max contract level leap, I don't see it looking good for him in that way.
It's interesting because you're probably correct in this, and I'm glad we disagree on something. Typically we agree, but I've been viewing Ingram as more of a 3, and Ingram played 62% of his minutes. This is from Basketball Reference, so there's obviously there'll be some error in the numbers, and with positions being more fluid, it's tougher, but 62% of his minutes were at the power forward position, the 4. I don't know what those minute breakdowns are after Zion's insertion back into the lineup. I've been viewing Ingram strictly as a 3. And as you say, a 3-man who is absorbing some of the usage that Drew Holiday leaves behind. Obviously, Bledsoe will take quite a bit of it, as will Lonzo. Zion as well. It'll be divvied up, but Ingram is going to get some of the pie. He's a max player. He's fresh on that contract. If it doesn't turn into more pull-up threes, which he's not really that great at, it probably turns into more pull-up long 2s. And there's a mix of passing because Ingram, I think, is an advanced passer for his play style. It's just tough to envision what Ingram is going to do to become a more dangerous player. And if he's going to be ill-fitted at the 3, as you said, what you brought up when you said Nicole Melli or Ingram at the 4, how else are you spacing this team out? How else are you going to play offense legibly in the half court? Those are the important questions. And Jackson Hayes, who is fun and has like a lot of pop to his game, is not, I don't think he drives winning yet. And Steven Adams just got extended. So he's going to play because, of course, he's going to play, as is Zion. So those 3 guys, Zion, Ingram, and Adams, one is the first overall pick, who is the most hyped up player currently in the league. Young player, I should say. It's like close to rivaling Doncic. Then you have a guy who's fresh off an extension in Adams. And then you have a guy who's fresh off a max extension in Ingram. Those 3 guys are going to play together. Quite a few minutes, one would think. I have no idea how that's going to work. But a lot of it is going to rely on Zion's passing, Adams' ability to work off ball, to screen and create space for others, and Ingram's spacing, which trended in the right direction last season, but is still, because you have to reach that 750 attempts to reach the normalization of the three-pointer, is still a bit of an unknown. So we'll see. Let's talk maybe backcourt. Now, it seems like a good idea. Lonzo, Bledsoe, Gilgeous-Alexander, who I think is actually pretty good, and not just because I'm Canadian, but have to see more of him. It's interesting. Bledsoe was not known as like this half-court offense killer in Phoenix. There was levels of creation to his game that people came to know, and it wasn't like, if you bring Bledsoe in here, your half-court offense is going to suck. He can probably return to a little bit of that half-court creation guy that he's been in the past. Lonzo, specifically for the clicks, but also because he's really interesting. What is his, for this guy, what is his ceiling? What is his floor with this team? Because I feel like he could vary a lot.
Maybe it's the easiest thing to say in this situation is if Lonzo is if Lonzo is trending up, the Pelicans are trending up. If he's trending down, Pelicans are going down. Seems obvious, but I think he affects the team maybe as much or more than Ingram because of his ability to space the floor. He'll stay on the floor because of his defense. Stan is going to love that. Stan loves his feel for the game. He's talked about using him in a hybrid role. So in transition, ball's in his hands. When it's not, it's not. But if he can continue to improve his stroke, like I said, 39% above the break threes. If he can become not necessarily a reliable spot up guy, but a respectable spot up guy, then his feel for the game, like you talked about, he'll find spots to be effective. He'll find gaps. Jason Kidd for a long time didn't have a jumper, but he is a force defensively and just making things happen. So, and as for the other point guard, Eric Bledsoe, a lot is made of the fact that he, hurt the Bucks in the playoffs. But I don't think enough is made about how effective he is in the regular season. When you can game plan for Eric Bledsoe, you're watching a lot of film, you are making him make the plays, and if he makes them, you live with it. If he doesn't, that's part of your game plan. That's in the playoffs. The regular season, I think he'll be a much more effective player, and if he listens to the chatter, which I'm sure even if he's not trying to, he's heard, he'll want to prove these people wrong, especially in a role that's very different from what it was in Milwaukee.
I think you make a really good point with Bledsoe is that he is and has been hovering around all-star status while in Milwaukee because he's so good in the regular season. And the Bucks might actually miss him quite a bit next regular season. He is a player who a lot of his strengths are mitigated when, as he said, the game plan comes along. But in the slog of a now 72-game season, a lot of teams probably won't have the attention to detail. And Bledsoe can, as a weak side attacker off of Ingram and Zion's space, can blow up the back end of a defense. And he's an above average passer, even though that hasn't been his role as a facilitator. He is good passing downhill. And I'm interested to see how much they can get him off ball and what he does with perhaps like a little bit more time on ball than he's used to. I think you bring up a good point, and maybe the backcourt seems like the fix for their regular season woes. It seems like the backcourt can fix a lot of what might be troubling this team or ailing them in the future. So I think that's really important that you bring that up. I'm excited to see what happens with them. They can do a lot for the Pelicans. Is there anybody else you find interesting on the roster you want to cover right now?
There's one guy I'm a huge fan, JJ Redick. I think he is the most affecting player on the team because of his gravity, because of his ability to play make out of these off-ball, in these off-ball situations. He'll catch it and go. I'll talk a little bit about it later in Coach's Corner, but Stan Van Gundy has on numerous occasions called him the best conditioned athlete in the league. He does so much for your team, and for a team that's really devoid of shooting, him being out on the floor, and especially him being the type of leader that he is, he will make guys better. He'll push guys in practice. He wants to get back to the playoffs. He had a perfect record up until last season of making the playoffs. He's the type of guy who, again, a lot in coach's corner, but the type of guy who can change the complexion of this team in a very important, and he will make them more efficient in that way. So when he's on the floor, things get a lot easier for Zion. If he's the one setting those pin downs, he can either slip, set a hard screen, that guy isn't getting through, that's a lob. Ingram on the weak side, or if you're going to play the three of them in some sort of triangle type spacing, he's going to get a lot of looks. And Ingram was 44, hovering to 45% on corner threes. That was his best shot. And so JJ is, I think, he's the only shooter, and he will dictate the way defenses play this team. And when he is off the floor, that's when I think you really have to start to worry if you're Stan and his staff, because he just does so much for you on a number of levels, especially offensively.
That makes sense. When I think about JJ and what he's done for a few other teams in the NBA to this point, is like you just plug him in and suddenly the weak side isn't so strong side anymore. And suddenly it's like, okay, there's a gap here. There's a seam, because teams aren't just loading up, because JJ Redick is one of the most consistent shooters in NBA history, and he'll unload. And he doesn't need space. Your point about the comment regarding the most conditioned athlete in the NBA, he's constantly in motion. If you have a letdown on the back end, he will scoot to open space. He'll make the shot, and he's kind of unrelenting in that way. I like that you bring that up. JJ Redick is a very, not a big personality, but a known personality in the league. He has his own podcast where he has his own thoughts come out. He likes to talk about the game. He's a huge fan of the game. He is a presence in the locker rooms he's been in. Who is the aux cord carrier? Who is plugging that thing into their phone? I guess, are aux cords obsolete? Have we made a segment of an obsolete piece of tech? Who uses aux cords anymore? It's all Bluetooth.
I'm a lot older than I look, so me.
What kind of phone do you have?
Sponsor here. No. No, I mean iPhone, but I am old, so I would rather use an aux cord.
Yeah, I think aux cords are super easy. I hate going through and setting up the Bluetooth. I hate it. And especially with the tech they put in cars. Cars are not Bluetooth friendly. Like they try and have this really sleek OS for the thing. No, not usually, sir. Not for me. But anyway, okay. The aux cord, the guy who's playing the music in the car. JJ Redick is a nominee. Brandon Ingram is your max guy. Zion is a potential future face of the league. Lonzo has a cult of personality because he came from the Lakers. Ingram counts for that as well. Josh Hart is super well-liked and very vocal. And Steven Adams is a hero to many because he saves people from burning buildings. This is speculation. I'm just assuming he does hero stuff in his off time. And so who do you think is setting the tone for this team? Who has the aux cord firmly in their grasp?
The only guy with a rap album cover. It's Stan Van Gundy, I think. It's Stan. I think he sets the tone at the very top. He has a much different role now than the last time we saw him because he was president of basketball operations with the Pistons as well as coach. So he was trying to juggle those two things. Everybody on this team is just so cool and calm, really, or not necessarily calm, but Zion, Zoe, Ingram, they all seem very chill. They're chill guys. JJ, he's his own guy, but I don't think he relates to. I'm sure he relates to his teammates, even though he's the vet in the locker room. But Stan, I think, has a way of connecting with players. I mean, look at Dwight Howard. Apparently, they still have a very good relationship, even though that's what Stan says. That's what Dwight says to the public. They still have a good relationship, or claim to have one, despite how things went down with the Magic. So maybe Stan is the guy with the aux cord.
That actually makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, Stan makes a lot of sense because you hear him talk about things outside of basketball. He has a depth to his intelligence and he has a depth to his personality that he shows when he's on broadcast or commenting to media and that kind of stuff. And I think he uses that depth to connect with a bunch of different types of players and to connect with them on their level. And it's Stan Van Gundy. There is a little bit of authority that comes with that name, even if the Pistons weren't a super good team. I think Stan Van Gundy, the franchise decision maker, kind of failed Stan Van Gundy, the coach, a little bit. But as a coach, he still has a lot of reputation and authority to what he's doing. So I actually do think that in a team that seems malleable with chill guys who are young and are brimming with talent, it is Stan Van Gundy, and this is probably why I got hired, to rein it in and to direct it in some way. A lot of these guys could end up being aux cord, in possession of an aux cord in the future. They have that potential, if this is an abstract thing that NBA players think about. But Stan Van is probably the guy setting the tone for this year. And I think that's a fine way to talk about it. All right, Evan. After the aux cord, we're going to plug into something else. A video you've made that has just slid neatly into this podcast, and it is Coach's Corner, where you walk through some things that perhaps the Pelicans should be looking at doing. What are you talking about today?
Like I said at the top, this one was complicated because this is the only team that we're tackling that is undergoing a coaching change. So I don't really know. And he's a guy who hasn't coached since 2018. So I went back and looked at some things that I felt the Pistons did that would be effective for the Pelicans. I matched up clips from this past season to some sets that Stan ran or were very similar to, and how they can be effective. But I lead it off with JJ Redick, because I think the JJ Stan connection is going to dictate what this team does and how far this team can go.
Perfect. Well, listener or viewer, get ready for that, because it's coming at you.
The first thing I wanted to take a look at is JJ Redick. Stan Van Gundy and JJ have a great relationship, and as dangerous as JJ is off the ball as a threat to score, he has gravity and he uses that gravity. He makes himself an even bigger threat as you see him make these little pocket passes off of pin downs by being a willing playmaker.
Their threes. Let success be your guide. Jackson.
It helps when a guy can shoot 45% from three like JJ did last year.
Straight on three.
A window here for New Orleans if the Pelicans can keep getting stops. Redick off the dribble.
Here's a DHO for the guy coming out of the corner right into a ball screen that Stan ran back in Detroit. Now, you can imagine how effective JJ Redick would be in this type of action. Well, actually, you don't have to, because here it is.
Redick chased by Porter off of Favors.
A little bit of a variation here, but just look at the amount of spacing this is able to generate, and imagine Ingram and Zion being able to play in this type of space. Imagine Zion instead of Andre Drummond here. Big, wide, fast, strong, rock-solid decision maker. When he pitches you the ball, chances are your defender is going to have a real bad experience trying to get through. He could turn it into a quick give and go, and this could be exactly what happens here.
They give it back. Minutes for Williamson. Hands it off to Redick. Redick for three. Got it.
And it was. They're going to get a lot better at lob passes to Zion Williamson in the future games.
Brandon Ingram from
Spain pick and roll and variations here. I can see Ingram being Stan's full-time 4. Redick and Ingram are guys who can burn defenders for the wrong reads, as you see here. And Zion, Jackson Hayes, Steven Adams, they're all lob threats.
Back when? In 2011.
Uh-oh, watch out! Brandon!
Hey, we're back. I'm glad you enjoyed Coach's Corner, and wow, so many new things that you've learned, and me as well. Evan blessing us with some of his insights and his endless archive of footage that he's been collecting for forever. Now,
I'm a video hoarder.
yes, a video hoarder.
Yeah.
Now, what we have here is that a lot of teams, the best teams, are defined by their best lineups, almost always. And for fan bases, the worst teams are defined by their best lineups as well, because they're projecting, hey, my team can be pretty good. This lineup just has to play more. And as a Raptors fan for a large part of my life, I spent a lot of time wondering if DeMar DeRozan and Sonny Weems could ever figure it out. It happens, okay? And I assume there will be some of the same hand-wringing from the Pelicans fan base this year. So Evan and I have come together with our best hypothetical lineup, a lineup that we think will have a good net rating and that will be used at least a decent amount of minutes. Evan, what is your idea of what the best lineup in New Orleans is?
All right. Full disclosure here. I need to pull up what I told you.
I remember
because
yours. You did 2 bailouts. You went Adam Zion, then you had Ingram, Redick, Ball, and then you had Bledsoe / Hart.
Okay.
So
I think the reason that is because I want to believe that the most potent lineup is going to be Zion at center. But the realist in me, the planner in me, I don't see it maybe as much as I would love to have that be the lineup they play the most. I just don't see it. The mainstays, Ingram, I like him at the 4 in that position. I feel that's where they're going to be the most effective. We talked about this earlier. Maybe one of our first disagreements. Exciting. Redick, talked about him. Super important. Ball, I think he finds a way to stay on the floor, and maybe Stan trusts him enough that he can figure out everything else, because the defense is the most important thing. And I have Bledsoe / Hart there because Josh Hart, I think, is an underrated rotation guy. An offensive rebounder, very sturdy. You can plug him in spots, but to be honest, I don't trust Eric Bledsoe, and I've said my piece about Eric Bledsoe. I don't trust him in maybe end of game situations, and that's how I initially thought of these best lineups. But if we're talking the lineup that is most effective for a team, then maybe it's not the closing lineup, and maybe Bledsoe is rolling, and maybe he's the guy out there.
yeah, I don't have Josh Hart, although if he were a Dungeons and Dragons character, his constitution would be sky high. He is sturdy. He is stiff. He is hard to move. He is curmudgeonly incorrigible. All of the superlatives and adjectives thrown at him. He's probably my favorite player on the Pelicans, actually. I really like Josh Hart. I don't have him, though. I have Adams, Zion, Ingram, Bledsoe, and Ball. And so this is really speaking to the aspect of you saying, I'm not sure if that's the closing lineup. That's what I'm going with. It's not the closing lineup. This is the lineup that I think wins a lot of minutes during the regular season. And I thought, I'm just going to stack good players and assume that Stan and those players figure it out. Adams is a positive player, as is Zion. Ingram, I think, can be. Bledsoe and Ball, I know can be positive players, and Bledsoe has been. I think that combination of just saying good players figure it out. Zion is really smart player. I think that's an underrated part of his game. Adams is a really smooth mover on offense, and he's always been overrated defensively, but he's still an okay defender. Bledsoe is a monster on defense and very disruptive as far as an attacker offensively, and Ball I view him as, even though he's underwhelming a lot of times, he is a genius on the court, I think. And he suffers from that idea that I talked about and that PD Webb talked about, is you have an idea in your head of how many possessions you should use a game as the shooter or as the scorer. And Lonzo doesn't have enough of those for himself. I think that is something that plagues his game a little bit, but he's a genius. He's a fantastic passer. As far as why not Redick, I thought during the regular season, having a good defensive team, just having Bledsoe instead of him or Lonzo instead of him would create more minutes wins just in the interim. Now, if JJ Redick isn't closing for the Pelicans, I would actually be surprised. And Josh Hart could fit in there too. But I wanted to stack good players, basically.
I'll be better next time about the // But when I first thought about this, I thought Zion, Melly, and then I had to stop myself because
he's good. Melly is good. Melly's good.
He is, absolutely. And he's a guy I would love to talk about because every time it seemed like, for the clips I went through, I actually went through it twice. The first time, all Zion. The next, Ingram. And then some Zion. And then again for Drew Holiday. Nico Melly was out there on the floor for them a lot, spacing with Zion. And so he's a guy who I could talk myself into being out there in important minutes and winning minutes. But it's a matter of shooting for me, for spacing. I told you how I feel about Redick. I understand your point. But it just feels to me that if you have both centers, then you need some assurance that there is going to be space. And if I'm game planning for it, Redick is the first name on there, but that's just me.
Another thing I think about with the Zion at center thing is that players don't necessarily behave as their hypotheticals do. Even if they are tangibly really good at things, you can't hypothetically place them against different types of players and have it achieve the same result. So while Zion hypothetically should be able to take the center position and absolutely mash teams offensively, he should be really good at that. That's not a guarantee. There's a reason that we don't see that many Giannis Antetokounmpo screens, not as many as he should be setting. Why isn't Giannis the best pick and roll screener and dive man in the league? I mean, he has all the talents to be that thing, but he isn't. Players just don't become what their skill sets say is most advantageous. Brandon Ingram is another example of that too. There are a lot of things like at the rim, his length, it would be very good if he had more eyes for the rim and used his length to finish over people and to draw fouls and all that kind of stuff. But players don't just become what we want. And I still am hesitant to just imagine Zion playing big minutes at the 5. He could, of course, but I don't know if it translates seamlessly. And maybe that's just a little bit of ignorance on my end.
No, but I mean, to your point, we're talking about a team that we don't know what they would look like under this coach just yet. Zion's defensive rebounding numbers are not what you would expect them to be. So that's why I settled on Adams / Zion, is because as much as I want Zion out there, as much as the league wants Zion out there, Steven Adams, I think, is the safer bet defensively. And we're talking about Stan Van Gundy. I told you all the things that I think he will place value on very early on. Zion is not – he could be an offensive force, but he's not there, and we don't know that he will be able to get there by the time this season rolls around.
Yeah. And like I said earlier in the podcast, maybe I'm reading into it like a little bit too much. This stuff is tough to project, but me saying Steven Adams is great at boxing out. He was able to spring Russell Westbrook into transition. Like when Russell Westbrook won MVP, the numbers of the offense of the Oklahoma City Thunder that year when Westbrook got the rebound were much better than when any other player got the rebound. And Steven Adams boxing out, allowing the guards to scoop and then jumpstart transition, I think actually is a really minute thing, but could project exceptionally well with Bledsoe and Ball and perhaps Zion even running too. So maybe I'm reading into it too much because that's not guaranteed to translate. It's happened elsewhere, but it is a thing that could happen. And that's basically all the preview is. But Jackson Hayes, Josh Hart, Nicole Melli, Alexander Walker, do you have any things you want to say about these guys before we get out of here?
Alexander Walker is a guy who, maybe because of his cousin, I expect certain things from. I don't necessarily expect him to be at Shea's level, nor do I expect him to like end up anywhere around Shea, but he's a guy who has the tools. He's a guy who I think will greatly benefit from Stan Van Gundy being his head coach. Same thing with actually most of these guys. Jackson Hayes is going to learn to be efficient in the limited minutes he will have. So these guys, they're going to, on paper, do they fit? It's iffy, but Stan is a guy who will maximize everything out of these players, and he will get absolutely everything he can, even if you limit them to one very specific thing, then Stan's going to do that.
Yeah. Jackson Hayes is interesting to me because it wouldn't surprise me if his future is one of like the best pick and roll bigs in the NBA and a guy who brings significant defensive playmaking pop, especially as a help side guy. That wouldn't surprise me. I also know, and this is maybe a little bit too armchair psychologist, but he openly was like posting about being pissed at the NBA that he wasn't on an all rookie team. And I don't know if the Pelicans signed Steven Adams so they have a default answer to Jackson Hayes saying, why aren't I playing 38 minutes? And because they know Jackson Hayes is going to be good, but he's one of those big men who in their fourth year, they kind of pop off, or their fifth year, which is not advantageous because then you miss your first big contract. But those kind of players do exist. And Jackson Hayes has the body and the kind of like, he is not very legible reading defenses or offenses yet, but he can put points on the board really quick and he can rack up blocks. So maybe they just want him to be kind of automatically pushed into a backup role so they can bring him along slowly and harbor a lot of that power and energy he has. But again, this could be way off base. I am not reporting this as somebody with sources inside the Pelicans organization or anything like that. Just a guy throwing out hypotheticals. And Jackson Hayes, I don't think you're a bad guy just because you're angry at the NBA. You're supposed to be angry. You're supposed to want love. So if you get angry at me too, I understand that. I think you have a hell of a skill set to work with. Evan, that feels like the Pelicans. How do you feel?
I feel pretty good about it. I will say, Jackson Hayes, if you're listening / watching, I can make a video for you. I've thought about it. I've thought about it a lot. So I'm okay with you disliking half of this duo, but if I'm going to make a video for you, I need to know you like me.
Yeah, that's, you know that about every player you've ever made a video for, right? You and LeBron, like pals.
Yep. I just need them to know that I see it.
Very good. Evan, the next episode will be Golden State. So I'm talking to the listener now. The next episode is the Golden State Warriors. That will be out Sunday, I guess? Question mark?
Soon?
Soon. It will be out
It's-
soon.
It's a lot of. I would love to guarantee a day/time. I can't. It's a lot of editing for the both of us. So hopefully Sunday. If not, shortly after.
Okay. It's coming. Thank you for listening to this one. Huge thank you to Evan for once again allowing me to rampage my way onto his channel to discuss basketball. It's always a blast. There's more of these coming, and I hope you tune into those.
Absolutely. And I say it every episode. Samson Folk, sensational, great writer, great friend. Please check out his stuff. I'll have his socials for you. I'll have his social and his stuff for you in the link below.
And if you want to comment on my graphics, I would love to hear what people think of my graphics. I'm so proud of them all the time.
Absolutely. And I talk about this in the description. I pull the clips. We have a lot of back and forth conversation about everything, but Samson is the one who puts this together, and these graphics, if you've been a fan of my channel, you know those so-so thumbnails. I try my best, but I'm busy coaching and cutting these clips up, but the graphics, all Samson. I love them. They set the tone for these videos. So, yeah.
Thank you, Evan. I guess that's it. Listener, viewer, see you later.